Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the RCI GDAS webinar titled Scoring the DON-R, which stands for Determination of Need Revised. It will be presented today by Kim Greer. She is with the Georgia Department of Human Services, the Division of Aging. Before we get started, let's cover a few conference details. If you have a question during the conference, we ask that you type in the question. All questions will be answered at the end of the conference. Also, if you are at your own computer station, a post-test survey will pop up at the end of the webinar. There will be 10 questions about the webinar and personal information questions such as name and email address that will enable me to send you a certificate. If you are not at your own computer, copy down the link that will be posted on the last slide of this presentation. Use the link at your own computer to complete the post-test. Certificates will be sent within 1 week after the closing of the test. Please complete the test before December 19th to receive your certificate. And remember, we will have this on the Rosalind Carter Institute website. We are now ready to begin. Welcome, Kim.
Well, thank you very much. Hey, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Glad you could all make it. The presentation that I have today, there's a lot of slides to go through, and doing a basic training on the DON-R, really this is about a 5-hour training class squashed down into an hour. So we may not be able to get to every single one of your questions, but as Elaine said, please, please, please type it into the chat section if you do have a question. If I notice questions pop up that I know I'll be able to answer during the course of this, I will. And otherwise, if I don't get everything answered, I am perfectly happy to have any of you email me afterwards to go over anything that I probably won't cover in detail just because there's so much information to cover. So that being said, I see some familiar names on the webinar, so welcome, and some unfamiliar names. So this is going to be really great. What I am going to do is move through the slides here. And our first one, because we work for DHS, here's what we have to show you from our vision and values and mission and core stuff, but basically there you have it. So moving on to the DON. Basically, what we're going to talk about here, the DON-R is, as Elaine said, it stands for the Determination of Need Revised. And for those of you who have heard me do this training before, I don't just love the DON. I think the DON is one of the most versatile instruments that I've ever run across in my entire career in long-term care and aging and disability. And it is just, you can do so much with it when you take a look at it. You know, it's only one page, and you look at, okay, you're only scoring 15 things, and you're only looking at a score from 0 to 3 on each one of these different things. When you start to really focus on what the DON does and what it can do for you, it is an amazing, amazing tool to really assess a person, period. Take a look at what that assessment tells you, and then take a look at what can we offer this person, what does this person need based on what this assessment tells us. And we're moving away, for those of you who are familiar with the DON and have used it, we're looking to move away from using just the total score as our only determining factor for services. And so by the time I get to the end of this, hopefully you'll have a bit better understanding of how to take a look at the DON and how to start filtering through to get down to almost specifically looking at each score to tell you something about what you can offer this person, what this person might need, what their caregiver might need. So that being said, the whole thing about the DON is, you know, for those of you who do assessments, you go out, you meet with people, and the moment you meet them, you think to yourself, I know this person needs something. I know this older adult is living in a situation where they need some help. And there's all sorts of different assessments out there, and the great thing about the DON is what it can do is it can tell you exactly, specifically where this person's need is. It's much different than a checklist-based assessment where you go in and you tick, you know, this person needs help with toileting and this person needs help with, you know, check this, check this, check that. At the end of that assessment, you have an assessment filled with check boxes. When you get to the end of the DON, what you have is something that tells you, yes, not only do you think you know this person needs help, now that you've assessed them, you can focus in on exactly specifically what area they need help in and what specific component of that task they need help with. So hopefully that will become a little clearer as we move on. Next slide. So, this whole thing about standardize anything, well, it assures consistency and uniformity statewide. The DON also allows, which checkbox assessments don't really allow, is that you can track change over time. This is really important when we start getting into, okay, I'm giving this service to this person. I reassess them, and it doesn't look like they're as needy as they were before. But because you can track change over time, you might be able to say they had a high need before. I put in this specific service. Now they have a low need in that particular area. I can prove that that service helped lower that need score, thus justifying the reason for this service to keep continuing. So tracking change over time is so very important, and the DON does it a really, really great way. And it can also help us achieve our desired outcomes for the person, not only for the person, but also for all of our programs and services in these times of waning budgets and sequestration and all that good stuff. Okay, the DON, and I'm sorry the slide's a little small, but if you guys got the training manual sent to you, this is about page 5 or it's page 7 in the training manual, and for those of you who are familiar with the DON, I know you have it completely, totally memorized. But what I'm going to go through is just explain the different components of the DON. One page, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful one-page assessment. You've got 4 columns in it. The first column is dealing with the different functions that you're going to be scoring the person on. So functions 1 to 6 are eating, bathing, grooming, dressing, transferring, and continence. Those 6 functions are the ADLs, or the activities of daily living, which are basically the things that you need to do pretty much on a daily basis to make it through your life or that day successfully. You pretty much need to eat just about every day, and these are sort of the self-management, managing your person types of activities. So under function, the 1 to 6 are the ADLs. The IADLs, or the instrumental activities of daily living, are numbers 7 to 15. Those are the instrumental activities of daily living are more of the managing the environment around you. So whereas the ADLs are managing your personal self and managing, the bathing and the dressing and that sort of thing in your day, the IADLs are sort of the higher functioning, managing money, telephoning, preparing meals, laundry, housework, outside home, routine health, special health, and being alone. So those are the only 15 functions that you are measuring in the DON and assessing the person on. And it's called revised because there actually at one point was a couple of other ADLs that they had in here, IADLs, but they realized as they were testing it is that even though you're not specifically assessing a person for falls or their ability to shop or their ability to do other things, you can take a look at different components of the DON and get a really good idea that yes or no, this person may be at risk for falls. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through. So they revised it, took off a couple of extra measurement functions, and we're down just to the 15. The next column is the level of impairment. And the neat thing about the level of impairment and the unmet need for care are the 2 things that you're scoring when you assess a person. And please keep in mind when you are assessing a person, whether it's over the phone or face-to-face, you're not assessing a person to see if they fit into a program. You're not assessing a person to see if they are eligible for your services. You're assessing the person's level of impairment and their unmet need for care, period. Regardless of what you have to offer them, regardless of what the care plan may end up looking like, regardless of what their diagnosis is, you are measuring for the person, you are assessing their level of impairment and their unmet need for care, period. It's what you do with the DON and the scores at the end of the scoring that then says, okay, these scores tell me certain things about what this person's level of impairment and unmet needs are. This is where I look at, okay, where is their need the most? What do they need? How can we help them? What sort of care plan are we building? So again, You're not going in thinking, I need to assess this person to see if they're eligible for meals. I need to assess them to see if they're eligible for personal care. You're assessing the person's level of impairment and unmet need for care. Everything else comes later when you start looking at the scores to see what then can I build, what sort of care plan, what sort of referrals are going to be appropriate for this person. And we'll talk a bit more as we go on about it doesn't matter initially what the person's diagnosis is when you're assessing them. If I'm assessing your level of impairment for eating, I'm assessing on a scale of 0 to 3 what your level of impairment is, period, based on a set of tasks that you may or may not be able to do. I then, once I score, then I can say, okay, what is causing the impairment? If I have an impairment for eating, is it that I have early dementia and I can't remember to eat, or I've forgotten that I've eaten, or is it that I can't hold a spoon, or is it that I can't chew? So when we talk more about what you're looking at in the scoring, you're scoring the person's level of impairment, and then you're looking at what is it that causes this impairment, because what causes the impairment drives what the care plan is going to look like. So you've got your level of impairment, and I have a question from somebody, from Christina. If you could rephrase that question, because I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. So if you want to rephrase that question, pop it in again. I'll take a look at that in just a second. So you've got your level of impairment and your unmet need for care. What you are, and you don't need to assess these all at the same time. You don't need to go in order. You don't need to say, go through the eating, bathing, grooming. As a professional practitioner, the art of the interview and the art of, drawing questions out from people. One thing that I've found really helpful with the Dawn is also, not just saying, can you eat, can you chew, can you do this? It's, if you're in front of the person, you can say to them, show me how you would do this. Show me how you would do that, because that may give you an indication of, because people are going to be like, oh, I'm fine. I can do all this myself, because they're thinking, you're going to stick me in a nursing home if I can't do anything. But if they're sitting there and it takes them 3 or 4 tries to get up out of a chair, but they say, oh, no, I'm fine with transferring and all that kind of stuff, you as the professional can look at that and say, okay, you may say you're fine, but I'm getting an idea that you're showing me that you're not completely fine. So level of impairment, unmet need for care. You assess and give a score to level of impairment at every one of these, every one of the 15 functions. If your level of impairment score is 0 in any function, if your level of impairment score is 0 in any function, your unmet need for care score is automatically 0 as well. Because if you have absolutely no level of impairment in performing a task, you automatically have absolutely no unmet need for care, because you have no unmet need because you're able to completely perform that function. So the only time you get an automatic score in unmet need is when your level of impairment is 0. Again, because if you have no impairment, you automatically don't have any unmet need because you have no need. Anytime the level of impairment score is 1, 2, or 3, you absolutely have to then take a look at separately, what is this person's unmet need for care for this particular function? Just because there's a caregiver in the scene and the caregiver lives there 24/7 doesn't automatically mean that the person's needs are met for every single function 100% of the time. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through looking at the specifics. So function, level of impairment, unmet need for care. The last section is comments. This is so absolutely, vitally, incredibly important, the comment section. You don't need to write paragraphs and paragraphs about what the score, why you scored a certain way. But absolutely, if you score anybody in level of impairment on a 1, 2, or a 3, please, please, please write something in the comment section. And as we talk about what you're looking at for the different scores, this is going to become really apparent that you only need to put in a bullet point or 2 to explain why the score is the way it is. Assume that the person who's picking up this Dawn, the only thing they know about this person is that what they're getting from the Dawn and what you've written down in the comment section. Help explain things. If I score a 1 in eating for level of impairment, and 3s and a whole bunch of other things, and then 1s or 0s and others. Explain that to me. Explain why I can do a certain thing but not something else. And this will become really clear as we start going through the different functions we're looking at. So that's the basis of the DON. I'm not going to get into talking about the scoring now, but you're looking at those 4 columns. That's pretty much it. Let me just take a quick break and look at the question that I got. I'm going to try and answer it, and the question was, does the focus change during the reassessment? And I'm assuming that means the focus of what you're looking at and how you're scoring the person. The focus of or how you perform the assessment on the DON should never change regardless of who you're assessing, when you're assessing them, and what diagnosis they have. The DON is an instrument that assesses function and unmet need for care. That's what it does. You score it the exact same way and you look at it the exact same way every single time you're assessing a person, period. It is an assessment tool. This is what it does. It is research-based, and if you score it and if you go through it the way that you should be going through it, you look at it the exact same way every single time. Okay, I'm going to skip past the history of the DON. Basically, the thing to remember about this piece is that it is a research-based tool, and it went through a whole series of university research. It has been validated and all those good kinds of things. So basically, it's not just somebody out there saying, oh, I think I'm going to throw this assessment tool together. It was done because the state of Illinois needed to prove that the persons that they have in service were the ones who were most in need. Because if you look at our Older Americans Act, it says you must be serving, other factors considered, you must be serving the people who are most in need. And the cool thing about the DON is it's going to tell you who is most in need based on the scores that you end up with. So, and the other thing too is that in the final analysis, the only things to emerge as predictive of need for services are functional impairment and cognitive impairment, because those are going to be the predictors of if I have impairments in those, if I have functional impairment caused by whether it's physical or cognitive, and I have unmet needs in those areas, I'm going to be needing some help in some of those areas. Going to skip past this one basically because it's research-based, it's valid, there's inter-rater reliability, so it just means it's a really great tool. Brief, easily administered. It can be done over the phone, and a lot of our assessments are initially done over the phone. It was designed to do face-to-face, but our skilled folks out there on the phones can get scores that are very close to the face-to-face ones based on the questions that are being asked. So we went through what it really meant. The scoring, it's a real scale. It actually means something. 0 and the difference between 0 and 1 means something. 1 and 2 means something. So it's not just random numbers. These numbers actually mean something. And again, you can track change over time. So we've already gone through these slides, which is great. I already jumped ahead and talked about activities of daily living. We talked about instrumental activities. So there's your functions 7 to 15. The thing that you've also probably heard as well is that this tool has been normed to a nursing home population. Basically what this means is, basically what this means is back in the 90s when they were testing this, they sent a bunch of researchers out into the nursing homes to do the level of impairment scores on people, and what they found was that if you score at least 15 in the functional impairment column, and then at least a score of 1 for unmet need. If you score 15 or higher in the level of impairment column, you're going to look like 2/3 of the people that live in a nursing home. That number, we're actually looking at renorming that number because you think about the acuity of people living in nursing homes in the 90s compared to now, and I'd like to think that number is probably going to be at least 20 or 25, but that's a whole other discussion, so forget I even said that. So, comment section, I mentioned that as well. Let's get right into what you are looking at. I already talked about if the column A, if the level of impairment is 0, B is automatically 0. If level of impairment is more than 0, you must absolutely, for each function, for each domain, assess the unmet need for care. So basically what I'm going to do first is, again, please type your questions in. If you have any questions, go right ahead. So, going to go through the 0 to 3, what these scores mean in the level of impairment and then the unmet need for care. And then I'm going to talk about the specific things that you're looking at in each domain that you're scoring for. So, level of impairment score of 0 basically means the person can perform, so you're assessing this individual, whatever function you're looking at, 1 to 15, the person can perform all the essential components of that activity. You're going to hear me say essential components a million times today because each of those 15 domains has about 5 to 6 essential components that you're looking at to score specifically for that one function. So, let's just say for eating. For eating, and this is on a slide a bit later on, but basically just for illustrative purposes, the basic essential components of eating are cutting your food into manageable pieces, getting those pieces of food to your mouth, chewing, swallowing, and doing the same with a hot or cold beverage. So that's all you're scoring when you're looking at eating. You're looking at, can the person cut the food into manageable pieces? Can they get the food to their mouth? When the food is in their mouth, can they chew it? Once it's chewed, can they swallow it? And can they do the same with a beverage? That is all you're looking at for eating. So I'm going to score an impairment score of 0 if I can perform all of those essential components, period. And the other thing is, too, if I am using a piece of adaptive equipment for any one of these functions, in that the piece of adaptive equipment allows me to perform all of the essential components. So let's say for eating, I've got rheumatoid arthritis, I have very bad hands, and I cannot pick up a spoon. But I've got some adaptive utensils that have really big handles on them, and because of that adaptive utensil, without my adaptive utensils, I would score a 1 for level of impairment on eating because I can't get that food up to my mouth. If I have that adaptive equipment, which allows me to pick up my fork, jab my food, and get it to my mouth, and I can do everything else, then my score is going to be 0, and in the comment section you're going to say, uses adaptive utensils. So the other thing, too, is if I can perform all essential components without any prompting. So when you're looking at folks with dementia, if I can do that function without any prompting as well, then I can perform all the essential components. I'm going to score a 0. The 1, you're starting to look at, okay, 0 is I can do it all. The score of 1, come on, slide. The score of 1 is I can do most of those essential components. I can't do every single one, but I can do most of them. Or it takes me a little longer to perform that function because I may get a little tired. It just takes me a bit longer. Or I need a little bit of verbal prompting to help me get through the task. So if we're looking at eating, if the essential components are those 4 or 5 that I mentioned, an impairment score of 1 is going to come where I can cut my food, I can pick it up, but I'm having a lot of trouble chewing because my dentures don't fit. And I can swallow fine, but it's just the chewing I'm having trouble with, and sometimes I cough a little bit because I can't quite chew and get the food into, to be able to swallow. But I can cut my food, I can get it to my mouth, I can swallow okay, and I can also do that with a beverage. The only thing I'm having trouble with is, my teeth. It could also be that I have early stage dementia or mild dementia, and I sit down to eat and I get my food cut up, and then I kind of forget what I'm doing for a minute, and the person next to me says, or my caregiver says, go ahead, lift the food to your mouth, go ahead and eat. I need a little bit of prompting. So this again is where the comment section comes in very handy, because if those 2 illustrations I just gave, those 2 would each score a 1 for, most likely a 1 for impairment in eating, because one person is unable to chew, one person needs prompting. So you can see now where the comment section becomes so very important, because if I pick up the Dawn, I look at the score that you've given, and it says eating, the person has a level of impairment of 1 in eating, And let's say they have a little bit of unmet need. Well, what does the 1 tell me? What does it tell me about what I can do for this person to help them? The 1 doesn't tell me what I can do to help them. The 1 tells me they're having trouble with one or two of the essential components. Write down in the comment section what that essential component is that's missing. Because if I have a 1 and I write down person has trouble with dentures and chewing, or person has dementia, needs prompting, those are 2 absolute completely different care plans and referrals based on the same level of impairment score. So that's why the comment section is so important. The score tells you there is impairment. The comment section tells you what cannot this person do, and that points you in the right direction of what you need to do. Again, if I scored a 1 because I can't pick up my utensils because of rheumatoid arthritis, you write that down in the comment section. Rheumatoid arthritis, could use utensils, would become independent with. 3 different scenarios, all scoring 1, but it shows you the comment section can really point to what service does this person need to help them with this. So 0 is can do everything. 1 is can do most of the essential components. The score of 2 in impairment gets onto can't do most of the essential components. So we're getting further down that list of maybe I'm having a bit of trouble cutting and a bit of trouble getting the food to my mouth. I can chew it when I get it to my mouth. I may choke every now and then when I swallow, and the same thing with a beverage. So I'm having more trouble with more of those essential components. Or I get a whole lot more tired and need to rest more. Or because of whatever cognitive issues I have, I'm requiring a lot more prompting to get me through that one task of those essential components of eating. When you get to the impairment score of 3, this is the most serious. When you're doing the DAWN, and if you're scoring people with a whole lot of level of impairments of 3 and a whole lot of unmet need, the 3 impairment score basically means the person cannot do any of those essential components. They can't cut their food, they can't lift it to their mouth, they can't chew, they can't swallow, and they can't do the same with a beverage. If you're scoring that in eating, then you're in a whole lot of trouble if you're not able to do any of those essential components and you have nobody there to help you out because you have that need. So the 3 is can't do a single thing of those components, or the person just requires step by step by step verbal prompting. Here, do this, take this, lift this, move your mouth up and down, okay, swallow, and the person is there doing constant verbal or physical assistance to lift the food up to the mouth, help the person remember what chewing is by moving their mouth up and down. So the 3 is cannot do any of those tasks. All right. Any questions to type in before we move on to the unmet need scoring? Okay. Again, feel free to type in at any time. Okay. So you technically could go through the entire level of impairment scoring without even looking at unmet need because you're scoring them differently. One does not depend on the other. So as long as you have a 1, 2, or 3 score in level of impairment, you're starting to look at the score for unmet need for care. Basically what you're looking at here is on the scale of 0 to 3, what is this person's unmet need for care in this one particular domain and this one particular function? Again, just because there's a caregiver or caregivers in the picture or the person lives with somebody, don't assume that their unmet need is going to be 0 for every single thing all the time. I use my parents as an example. My dad is fairly heavy care, and my mom is the main caregiver who's there all the time. She barely weighs 100 pounds and is a tiny little person, and he's a much bigger person. She's there all the time. I would absolutely not score 0 for unmet need in everything because there are some physical tasks she cannot do. She can't lift them out of the tub. She can't do a few other things. So just because there's a caregiver in the picture, don't assume that it's 0. You need to look at each single function and what that caregiver provides or caregivers. So there's also a couple of the components that you're looking at here where even though there's a caregiver available, if the person finds that caregiver unacceptable, as in I'm an 85-year-old woman, and I'll be darned if I'm having my 57-year-old son bathe me. That is just not something I am going to do. I'm not comfortable with that. So even though that caregiver is available, if it's unacceptable to the person, and there's 3 specific functions where it's unacceptable, which are the intimate tasks of bathing, dressing, and continence. If the person is like, no way, that is just not proper, then you consider that an unmet need, and that person has need in that area even though there's a caregiver available. One thing we're looking at an unmet need as we go up from the 0 to 3 scores are, what is this person's risk to health or safety with this function and their unmet needs. So, see, I was right. There we go. Bathing, dressing, and continence are the ones that if someone's available but the person is like, no way, no how, then you consider that unavailable and that person has an unmet need in that particular area. So, unmet need care is 0. Basically, so you've assessed the person that they have a need of 1 in eating, in that they can't cut their food into manageable pieces. And they have a caregiver who is with them at every single meal to cut their food into manageable pieces. If that person has absolutely somebody there 100% of the time to meet the need for that particular function, then you're going to score them. And their level of impairment could be a 2 or a 3. The score of impairment does not dictate what the unmet need is. I could have a score of 3 for telephoning, and I can't do a single thing, but there's somebody there to help me all the time to do it if they're available to help me with it all of the time. I am going to go back to the question that Kathy just asked in a minute, if that's okay. I'm going to get through the rest of the unmet need scores and go back to that because those are a couple great questions. So, unmet need, care is 0. There is no risk to my health and safety. My need is being met in this particular function all the time. The score of 1, as you move up the scale, kind of like with the unmet need for the impairment where it's sort of, I can do everything, most things, not most things, and nothing. Same with the unmet need. 0 is my need is met all of the time. 1 is that my need is met most of the time. So there's not a whole lot of risk to my health and safety. There's a little bit of risk now and then, but it's really kind of minimal because, I have real trouble doing my housework and my laundry, and because I have a physical disability. My daughter comes and cleans my home once a week on the weekends, but she sometimes travels with business, and she's not there every weekend to clean, so sometimes my house gets a little dirty now and then. That is not a huge risk to health and safety, but the need's not getting met all of the time. So you're looking at most of the time. So when you move on to the 2, it makes sense that your need for assistance is not met most of the time. So things are starting to get a little more serious in that if I have a level of impairment in something and my need's not getting met most of the time, this is going to be something where it's more of a risk to my health and safety because my need's not getting met most of the time. So 0 is all of the time, 1 is most of the time, 2 is not most of the time, and you can pretty much guess what 3 is. If you've got people with levels of impairment especially in their ADLs, and they're scoring a lot of 2s and 3s, especially 3s in unmet need, this to me is an absolute red flag to say, holy cow, this person has a functional impairment and their need is never getting met, and this is a huge risk to their health and safety. These are the people that you really need to focus on. If we're talking about serving people who are most in need, the people who are scoring a lot of 2s and 3s are pretty much going to be your ones most in need, depending on what they're scoring it in, because they're getting assistance hardly ever to do what it is they need help with. So,
can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
We have a lot of questions about whether this presentation is going to be available later. Yes, it will be. It will be on the RCI website. I'm going to do my best to have it put on our website today. So the slides will be available. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. And that's a great break to go to the couple of questions that popped up that I'd like to address as well. Okay. Kathy, I'll get to your question about ability when we get to the specific, what you're scoring in each domain. The question is, talk about how to score when the person has the ability to do something but chooses not to. I will definitely address that in about 5 minutes. Her second question is, what is the best way to score when the person's primary diagnosis is a mental illness? The best way to score, period, is regardless of the person's diagnosis. I don't care what is causing your impairment. It doesn't matter to me if you are so depressed and you can't get out of bed because you have clinical depression that's not being addressed, or you can't get out of bed because you have a physical disability, or you can't get out of bed because you have dementia and don't know how to get out of bed anymore. Your diagnosis for that level of impairment does not matter when I'm measuring your level of impairment. The reason why the mental illness question comes up all the time is, and I'm going to say this again, the DAWN assesses a person, period. It doesn't assess differently based on, you shouldn't be assessing differently based on what the person's diagnosis is, because you're just measuring level of impairment and unmet need for care. The mental illness question comes up because for CCSP, for our waiver community care services program, you cannot have a primary diagnosis of a mental illness and be eligible for CCSP. That, in my mind, is a completely different issue than you're doing the DAWN on a person who has a mental illness. You would score that the same way you would score it on any other person with any other diagnosis that you're doing. The CCSP issue is a completely separate one from how you would actually score the DAWN. The other question I will get to before moving on is, got a couple more. One more. Would it be best to assess the level of care first and then go back and assess the unmet need? That's sort of a personal preference of, as you're doing these assessments, you'll figure it out, because sometimes you can answer both at the same time, and sometimes you can go through the level of impairment and then someone will say something or you'll watch them do something and you'll be able to go back and assess their unmet need for something that you've already measured. So there's no prescribed way of how to do this first and then do this. I think that's more of a personal preference of how you get out and start talking to the person. Thank you for those questions. Okay, time for the assessment. So, holy cow, look at the time. All right, I'm going to buzz through the 15 domains and the essential components that you're going to be looking at. Keep in mind, you don't have to write this all down because you're going to be getting these slides. So, essential components. Bathing. Oops, I missed eating. Eating we already talked about. So you're looking at, when you're scoring, this is for level of impairment. Assess the person's ability to eat using, cut your food, get it to your mouth, chew and swallow. You're not counting, can the person prepare a meal, can they get it to the table? You're just looking at the function of eating. I'm not going to go through what you look at specifically for every single unmet need for care, because it really looks the same for all of the different functions. If I have an impairment in eating, is there somebody there, none of the time, some of the time, most of the time, or not most of the time, or none of the time, to help me with whatever impairment I have? So I'm just going to focus on these essential components. So those are the essential components for scoring eating. Next on the list is bathing. All you're looking at for scoring bathing is, you're not counting can the person get to the bathroom. You're saying the person is either in front of the sink because they sponge bathe, or they're in front of the tub because they're going to get in the tub for a bath or a shower. Can they get in and out of the shower or the bathtub? Can they turn the taps on? Can they regulate the water temperature? Can they scrub themselves head to toe, rinse themselves head to toe, get back out of the tub, and dry themselves head to toe? That's what you're looking at. And we're talking about minimum hygienic standards as well, which, some people don't bathe as often as others. And back to Kathy's question about if the person chooses not to bathe, how would you score that? If they're choosing not to bathe because of a physical or a cognitive dysfunction that is impairing them to be able to bathe, so I have dementia and I don't remember to bathe, or it's just easier for me to say I'm not going to do it, or I forget, you're going to take that into consideration when you're scoring the person. Because if they can't do it based on a disability, that's definitely going to give them a level of impairment score. If I am a regular Joe and I'm out there and I just don't want to bathe because I'm just lazy, or the one that comes up a whole lot is I don't want to manage my money because I've never managed my money. My husband always took care of it. He's dead now and my son does it. You're not measuring or not whether or not the person wants to do it away from a disability. If I have the functional capability to do a task, you're measuring, could I get into a tub, out of a tub, turn the knobs, regulate the water temperature. If I choose not to manage my money and my son does it, you'll see later on the questions are going to be, do you understand what money is? Do you know what it means to make change? Do you know what a dollar bill is? Do you know how you pay a bill? You're measuring the person's level of impairment for a function, not whether or not they choose to do it, not based on any disability or cognitive impairment. If they are choosing not to bathe because, again, they are highly depressed and just don't care anymore and it's not being addressed, that's going to give them a level of impairment because it is based on a diagnosis. I hope this is all making sense, and again, please feel free to call me afterwards or email me to clarify any of this stuff. Grooming. All you're looking at grooming is basically combing hair, drying hair, taking care of facial hair for men, shaving, and the important one in this is nail care, including foot care, toenail care, and dental hygiene. So can the person raise their arms up to brush their hair, or if somebody hands them a brush and verbally prompts them, can they do that? Can they get down and clip their toenails if they need to? Can they undo a tube of toothpaste, squeeze it onto a toothbrush, whatever. Those are the essential components that you're scoring for grooming. Dressing. This is just the person's ability to pick up clothes, undo zippers and buttons that might need to be undone, get their arms and legs into whatever it is they're putting on, doing up their clothes, zippers, buttons, Velcro, whatever it happens to be. Can they reach down and get their socks on? In this, you're also considering, and this is where persons with dementia, you might notice some difference in this, is that you also have to consider whether the clothes chosen are appropriate for the weather, and is the clothing chosen appropriate for the weather and the social situation. So, sometimes people with dementia will put on a shirt, forgot they've put on a shirt, put on another shirt, maybe forget they've put that on and put on another shirt, so they may have a few layers of clothing on. So is that appropriate for the social situation and the weather? Not so much of a big deal down here, but maybe sometimes do they have the strength to pick up a winter coat and put it on, or put on winter boots? And interestingly enough, if the person has a prosthetic device, including a hearing aid, that's considered in dressing. So can I put on my artificial limb, or can I put my glasses on, or can I put my hearing aid in? That's one of the essential components in dressing as well. Somebody just put up a question about CCSP again. I'm going to leave that to the end if you don't mind, and if I don't get to it, I will give you my email address. But McKinney, I'm just going to leave that for a minute if you don't mind, so I can get through these components. Dressing impairment as well, when you're evaluating the unmet need. I just popped this in. We talked about this. As with bathing, if intimate assistance is available but inappropriate or opposed, you consider that the unmet need is, the person's going to have an unmet need in that domain. Transferring. This is a good one. This is only, this is not mobility around the house. This is not getting in a car. This is not transferring on a bus. Transferring is just simply, can the person get out of and back into the place that they normally sleep? So if I normally sleep in a bed, can I push myself up into a sitting position, swing my legs over the side of the bed, push myself up to a standing position, and reach any assistive device that I might need, like a cane, or plop myself down in my wheelchair? If I sleep in a lazy boy chair or on a sofa, same thing. Can I get myself down into that sofa or lazy boy, and once I'm done sleeping, if that's my normal place to sleep at night, can I get myself back out of that lazy boy? If it's one of those mechanical lift chairs, can I work the buttons on those to get myself back up? That's all that transferring is the person's normal place of sleeping. And impairment score, excuse me, for continence, this is, can the person make it to the bathroom on time? Once they're in the bathroom, can they get their clothing off to the extent that they need their clothing off to whatever they're going to be doing in the bathroom? Can they sit on a toilet or stand there or do whatever they need to do? Can they get back up again? Oh, can they clean themselves off? Can they get back up again, do their clothes up again? That's what you're measuring in continence. For continence. So if somebody says to you, oh yeah, I'm fine, I managed that just fine. Yeah, but now and then again I'll wear a brief just because I can't quite make it to the bathroom on time sometimes. If they can't make it to the bathroom on time, that's going to be a level of impairment score, all things other considered equal. That's going to be probably a score of 1. In your comments section, you're going to then probe a little bit to see if the person will answer, is it that you forget to go to the bathroom? Is it that you have some urgency control? Is it that you what is it about the score of 1 that you can't get to the bathroom on time that we may be able to help you with? And that is the 1 to 6 ADL scores that you're measuring. So we're moving on now to the IADL. Managing money. Like I mentioned before, just because a person doesn't do something, you're measuring their ability to explain to you or show you, do I have the ability to do this? Do I really have an impairment that's keeping me from managing my money, or is it just that I'll randomly look at DONs just because I really enjoy that, and I'll see DONs that are scored level of impairment, 0s on every single thing, every single score except managing money will be a 3 level of impairment, which means the person has absolutely no idea what money is, doesn't know what a budget is, doesn't know how to make change, doesn't understand the concept of money, and the comment section will say, son takes care of finances. You're not measuring desire to do something. You're measuring, does this person have the understanding, the functional understanding of, so in managing money you're looking at, do they understand the difference between a bill and a coin? Do they understand that if you buy something for 50 cents with $1, you'll get 50 cents back again? Do they understand what a bill is and what a bill does and how you might pay a bill? Those are the things that you're looking at when you're looking at, does the person have the ability to manage the money? If they say, oh, my son takes care of it, then the next question would be, you could ask, well, if you had $1 and you bought something for 50 cents, how much change would you get back? If they can answer that and answer, well, I get my bill in the mail and I know it, I have to send the bill in with a check because that means my bill is getting paid and I understand that, money is exchanged for goods. If they understand what money is, then they are functionally able to do all of those essential components. Just because they choose not to do them, you're not scoring desire or intent on the DON. You're scoring, do they have the functional ability or do they have any impairment in these components? It's pretty much going to be the same with, that's not next. I was going to say preparing meals, but I'll talk about that in just a sec. So, telephoning. All you're looking at for telephoning, essential components are, can I pick up the phone? Can I dial, whether it's dialing a number or I know that by pressing 1 I get to speed dial and end up with my daughter. So can I pick up the phone, dial, hold the phone to my ear, and very important, especially for people with dementia, can I talk on the phone and be understood? And can somebody talk on the phone to me and I understand what they're saying? That is a really important piece of the telephoning because sure, if I have dementia, sure I can pick up the phone. If it rings, hold it to my ear. But if I have no idea what's going on, that's an impairment. And it's because my dementia is not allowing me to understand what's going on the phone. So pick up the phone, dial, talk, and hang up the phone when you're done. Preparing meals. This is the other one where the person might say, well, my wife took care of that for me my entire life, so I don't cook. Or they'll, and I just don't cook. Or the person will say, yeah, I can't cook like I used to. And I see that quite often in some of the comment sections is the person will be scored a level of impairment score of 1, and the only comment will say, can't cook like they used to. So what we're looking at in preparing meals, what your scoring is, even if the gentleman or whoever says, I don't cook anymore or I can't cook the way I used to, What you're scoring specifically excuse me, is, can the person open a container? Can they open the top of a box? Can they use a can opener and open a can? Can they open a package? Can they dump something into a pot? Can they turn the dial on a stove? Can they put a piece of toast? Can they put a piece of bread into a toaster? And can they also clean up after the meal? That's what you're scoring. So the person who says, I don't cook like I used to, I only make light meals, well, great. If you're making light meals, it means you can open a package, use a microwave or use a stove, and adequately meet your needs. If you are the gentleman who says, my wife never cooked, you say then, well, show me, how would you open a can? And ask them to physically just mime, show me how to open a can. And if the person's sitting there talking away and using their arms and moving and making gestures, odds are they have the physical ability to be able to open up a box top. So what you're measuring is opening containers, using appliances, and cleaning up after the meal. This is a really important one when you're looking at the provision of a meal to this person. Let's say that I have a slot for Meals on Wheels, and I'm looking at this person and it says they have a 2. They're scoring a 2 for level of impairment in preparing meals. And you look over, and they've got some unmet need in there, whatever the score may be. You look over in the comment section and it says they are unable to open packages because of whatever reason, and they cannot use a microwave because of whatever reason. Well, so if they can't do those 2 things, then if you're giving them frozen meals and they can't use a microwave or open a package, is that going to solve that issue? Or if they can't open a package, is sending them a hot meal going to solve anything? Because if I can't open a package, odds are I'm not going to be able to open the package that meal came in. So that's why that comment section is so very important to say. If I can open containers, fine, but I can't use appliances, that's different than I can't use appliances, but I can open containers, or I can use appliances. So again, what essential component is missing? Because it makes no sense, again, to provide a meal to somebody who can't open a package, if that's what their impairment is. Laundry impairment. So this is where you're measuring the person is sorting laundry, opening the lid, dumping the stuff in, turning the knobs on the washer, pulling the stuff out of the washer, transferring it to the dryer, and where my big impairment is folding and putting it away. Those are the essential components that you're measuring. If the person has to go to a laundry facility, like a laundromat or a coin laundry, you're not measuring in this their ability to get to and from the laundry facility. That's measured somewhere else. Let's say the person's already at the laundry facility. You're then measuring, can they open up those big drums that they have there? Can they use the coins to manage their laundry? So again, you're just looking at sorting, carrying, loading and unloading, folding and putting away. And housework. This would be my big impairment for those of you who have heard me talk as well, but it's because of desire, not because of functional impairment. What you're looking at is the person's ability to do routine housework. And we're not talking spotless, immaculate, eat off the floor kind of housework. It's, again, you're looking at sort of the minimum hygienic conditions. Do I have the ability to sweep up if I spill something? Can I lean over and scrub my toilet if that needs to be done? Can I vacuum my floors or sweep if I have hardwood floors? Can I dust a little bit? Can I clean up something if I spill? And again, cleaning sinks, toilets, and bathtubs. That's kind of the minimum stuff you're looking at. And, again, you're looking at physically, am I able to do this? Is there something, have I had a stroke and I'm not able to manage the vacuum cleaner or lean over because I'll fall over? Do I have dementia and I need somebody to remind me to do these things? The essential components are sweeping, dusting, the basic sort of housework that you need for the minimum hygienic standards. And again, you're not looking at laundry in the housework domain, and you're not looking at the refusal to do, I refuse to do housework all the time, but it's not based on any impairment. It's based on, I'm just not into that. If the person is refusing to do it because they have dementia and they can't remember how to do it, that's different. All right, we just have a couple more domains to go through, and the time is looking good. So, outside the home. What we've talked about so far is just about everything that happens inside your home. So you're standing on your doorstep, you're ready to go out. What you're measuring here is, does the person have the ability to get out onto the porch or whatever, get downstairs if they need to get downstairs, manage streets, porches, sidewalks? Can they get to essential places that they need to go? And essential places are really medical appointments, banking, and shopping and grocery shopping. So can I still get in and out of my car and drive? Or if I don't drive anymore, can I get in and out of somebody else's car? Or can I get myself to the public transit, get myself up and down on that public transit and manage that public transit? When I get somewhere, can I open the door to the bank? Can I get over the threshold? Can I climb the stairs when I'm there? So you're managing how can I get around, where I could get around and do the stuff I need to outside of the home. I have a question here that says, where would heavy housework and yard work fall in the IADL section? My first thought on that would be we're not measuring the ability, there's nothing that specifically looks at measuring yard work or pulling your chest of drawers away from the wall so you can vacuum behind it. That, because I said before, you kind of look at stuff and it's going to get captured. If the person says to you, I can't do these things anymore, then odds are if they can't do heavy housework and can't do yard work, you're going to be looking at, they're probably going to have level of impairment scores in outside the home, because if I can't do my yard work, I'm having trouble maybe negotiating my stairs and getting out into the yard, or with the heavier housework, if I am showing that I'm having trouble transferring because I don't have the strength to get in and out of my bed, then odds are I'm not going to have the strength to do the housework. The heavy housework, a lot of these things can be justified by looking at the scores of other things. When I look at should a person be getting a home-delivered meal, I look at their outside home score, their preparing meal score, and sometimes their eating score. So looking at different conglomerations of different functions can help answer those questions. So outside home is managing yourself outside the home, getting in and out of cars. If the person does not have access to transportation to get themselves somewhere, if they're in a rural area and there's no bus system, or they're unable to get in and out of a car and the mobility bus doesn't come to them, then their impairment score is possibly going to go up on being outside the home because they're not able to get to the essential places where they need to go. Okay, routine and special health. The main distinction between these two, and I'll kind of flip back and forth, is routine health care is your basic everyday kind of stuff that you can do on your own without the constant monitoring of the event or having a professional practitioner do it for you. So taking a prescribed medication, putting on a Band-Aid, if the doctor says go home and exercise, it'll help you lose weight and it'll help manage your diabetes, managing those sorts of things are routine, everyday sorts of health care that you don't need a professional monitoring on a daily basis or a professional doing for you. If I have no routine health care needs, if I take no medications, if I don't need any of this kind of stuff, if I don't need to do my vital signs, I may score a 0 because if I have no need to do it, I don't have an impairment. The distinction then between the special health care is that these are the things you're looking at where it's a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist comes in and takes you through the actions that you need to be doing. If it's complex catheter care, if it is IV medication that a nurse has to come in and hang for you, it's something where a professional practitioner is either there helping you with it or there performing it for you. And in that case, you're going to then be measuring the person's functional ability to be able to comply with what this person is asking them, and are they able to go through their exercises? Are they able to adequately not be hitting at the person if they're trying to change their catheter? So the main difference between the routine and the special is either performed by or visually monitored by a healthcare professional. Question, how would you rate a person who is wheelchair bound under transportation if the person has difficulty transitioning to cars? So if they have difficulty getting in and out of a car but can still do it, I'm going to say all other things considered equal, I would probably score that at least a 1. And my comment in the outside home section would be uses wheelchair for transportation, has difficulty getting in and out of a car but can still do it because they're going to be taking a bit longer than a person who doesn't have a disability to get in and out of that car. If they were completely unable to get in and out of the car and somebody had to lift them up and put them in and lift them up and bring them back out again and they helped in absolutely no way whatsoever, that's going to make the score higher. It might almost be a 3 on that if the person has to be pushed in the wheelchair, lifted in, lifted out. Hope that answers your question. Very last, yep.
Kim, I was just going to say, I want everyone to stay with us now. She's answered a lot of questions along the way.
Yep.
I know we have gone for our hour, but just hang in there with us, okay?
You're on the last slide, and then I can buzz through in 2 minutes about the scoring, and I'm sorry I talk so much.
No, you're good, you're good. I just want everyone to stay with us.
Okay. Being alone, last one. So being alone, what you're measuring is the person's ability to be left alone safely, and do they have the ability to recognize and respond appropriately to an emergency situation. So if I drop a glass on the floor and I'm in bare feet and it shatters everywhere, do I have the physical and or mental wherewithal to understand what has just happened and deal with it adequately? If there is a fire on the stove, can I recognize it's a fire, and can I get myself out of the home adequately if I'm left there by myself? A lot of times a person with dementia is going to score at least a 1 or a 2 or a 3 on this because of their dementia. They're not going to be able to recognize what the emergency is and respond to it appropriately. So those are the 15 domains. The only thing that I'm going to say next really quickly is we didn't talk about the scoring, but I really just wanted to cover this really quick, and it'll be the last thing I talk about. So you add up, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but if you take the time to read through the manual, basically what I want you to take away from this is the very bottom sort of orangey score is the absolute total score of every single number that you've circled. What becomes important are the 4 different components of adding up the ADLs and the IADLs separately. So you add up my level of impairment for ADL, my unmet need for ADL, my level of impairment for IADL, my unmet need for IADL, and you get 4 different scores that add up to the total, but you're going to get 4 different scores. Those are the ones that are really important because let's just say really quickly I score a 40 total on the DON. When you're looking at services, if you have 2 people that score a 40, who are you going to serve first? That's when you go back to that document and you take a look and you see, okay, the first person who scored a 40 scored 15 in level of impairment and 25 in unmet need. The second person scored 25 in level of impairment, but only 15 in unmet need. So even though they both score a 40, when you start looking at those separate scores, you might want to then take a look at the person who has the 15 level of impairment, but the 25 for unmet need, because they have more unmet need than that other person who scores a 40. And if we're serving people who are most in need, that's who you're going to want to look at first. And then depending on what their needs are, you're then going to take a look at, well, if I only have a homemaker service available, but their need isn't in laundry and housework and preparing meals, then I'm going to go back to that other person and see where their unmet need is. So that's a whole other conversation to have, but start looking at the scores separately that way. Please use the comment section. It is so helpful. And I thank you all for everything, and I'm willing to stay on if you all want to put more questions in. I am perfectly fine with that. I didn't put my contact information up here, but I will give it to Elaine if that's okay to send out to you guys, or Elaine if you have it.
Yeah, that'll be fine. They can contact me, and I'll be glad to forward it on to them.
Okay.
Or do you want us to slide through the next few slides before we get to the...
No, it's just about the scoring, and it's really just kind of what I talked about, so I'm good.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to scooch it on then to the very last slide for those of you that want to take the post-test. And remember, if you are not sitting at your own computer, you'll need to copy down that link. And again, the whole webinar will be on our website, and that's at rosalindcarter.org. Give me a little bit of time to get it up there because I don't do it. I have to get someone else to help me with that. And does anyone else have any questions at this time? Kim, that was great. You covered a lot of information and gave us really the basics and everything.
Good.
So I appreciate it.
Good. And I'll come out anywhere to do the full training for anybody who wants it.
That's great. All right, here we go. Al has another question for you. Many of
Okay.
our clients come to senior centers. However, we don't get to see a lot of the areas 1 through 5. How do you rate them when you see them after they arrive to the center?
Well, what I would probably do at the 1 to 5 is, sit down with a person and have a conversation. And also if they're at your center and they're there for a meal and you're watching them eat, that's pretty much going to give you an idea of what they're able to do for eating.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down and ask them. I just want to go over these few things with you. Just want to see if you need any help in any areas. How is it? Are you able to get in and out of bed and show me? How can you get in and out of this chair? It's a bit more of the observation as well as the questioning. Because if they say to you, oh, yeah, perfectly fine, I can get in and out of my bed fine, but it takes them 5 or 6 tries to get up out of the chair, that's going to give you a bit of an indication that it's going to take them a bit longer to get out of bed, so maybe they're not going to score a 0 on transferring because they're having trouble getting out of this chair. Odds are they're going to be having trouble getting out of their bed. So it's a bit of detective work. The continence one, that may just be watching them at the center and, doing some questioning. People may or may not be open to answering that. The dressing, for sure, if they show up wearing clothes that are inappropriate or their buttons are mismanaged or, again, I think with those ones it's going to be questioning the person and just watching what they're able to do around the center.
Okay. Christina just popped up. Most clients become embarrassed by the continence assessment. Any tips on getting them to feel more relaxed about answering these questions?
Well, let's think through this. So if you're asking them about the essential components, which are can you get there on time, when you're in there, can you do everything, in my mind, that question, you do the best you can. If you're just meeting the person and there's not really a connection that you've built with them yet, it might be a little more difficult. But in my mind, being respectful and just being upfront and saying, all we're trying to do is just get an idea of if you're having trouble in any of these areas, there's probably some things we can do to help you, to help maintain these certain areas so that you can keep coming to the center or that you can feel comfortable about these things or that we can provide you in your home that might be a little more helpful. So this may not be, I would be, I would be perfectly fine with saying, I know this isn't a comfortable issue to talk about. Would you mind terribly just, helping me with this to figure out if there's something we can do to give you a hand? It's all designed to help keep you at home longer. That may or may not work. It depends on the person. Some persons you might never get the answer from, but that's probably what I would do to look at it.
Okay, and Al wants to know how's the best way to get you to come out to their center and train their managers.
Send me an email.
That's what I was thinking, or send it to me and I'll send you her contact information.
Yep.
And also, I've got a question on here about the manual. Now, I did send the manual out with the emails when asking everyone to register. If for some reason it was not forwarded on to you, just send me an email and I'll be glad to just send it off to you. But for right now, Leah, I got you covered. So again, contact me, contact Kim, and we'll get back with you.
Thanks for your questions, everybody.
Okay, everyone, have a good day and stay warm.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.